All right, thank you for listening to Remake Rewind. This is kind of a reboot of sorts. We had some host changes. This is our third year anniversary, and we decided to take a little bit of a hiatus and come back to the show fresh with some new talent. And I'm really excited to introduce my new co-host. I've got Alex Pulisci on the line. I'm really excited to have him. He's going to bring a different point of view to the podcast than what we've had. Of course, I'm a film buff, but I'm still an outsider looking in, somebody who's doing this as a hobby, who likes to know about movies, but I'm not in the industry at all. And I've got Alex, who's actually a filmmaker, writer, director, and kind of knows what it's like to be on the opposite side of the camera and the opposite side of the screen. So really excited to bring him on, and I'm just gonna let him introduce himself and tell us why we should give a shit about what he says about movies.
Yeah, hey, what's going on? My name's Alex Pulisci. Like Mike said there, he got it right, which is we're off to a good start. We met when I was up in San Francisco in school, starting my filmmaking journey up there at SF State, and I made a couple short films while I was in college, and came down to LA and started interning at companies, doing coverage and whatnot, and working on sets, PAing, doing a little bit of background acting. And I've been writing a lot for the past 4 years or so, doing some horror features, and done another handful of short films, and just trying to work my way through the industry. And I'm glad to be on the show. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a great new way to start the third year of the podcast. So for all intents and purposes, this is going to be a remake, reboot of the podcast itself. So obviously we cover remade and rebooted movies. For our third anniversary, normally we kind of take a brief hiatus during the winter, and I decided to really revamp this show for this 3-year occasion. So we're going to be changing things up a little bit. We're still going to be doing the movie-to-movie comparison that has been a staple of our show, but we're also going to be doing topic episodes from here and there. A bulk of our episodes will still be based off comparing movies, but we will be doing some theme-based where we kind of take a theme and just have a discussion versus, talking about specific movies, which is really exciting. And we're also bringing back the news segment. We're going to talk about, movie news in general. We're also going to be doing a couple different segments just to try to keep the show fresh. And so you guys can get to know us as hosts a little bit more than just, us talking about movies and our opinions about specific movies. We're going to be kind of talking about things that we're doing in our personal lives and what other kind of media we've been enjoying and watching besides the movies that we watched that week for the podcast. So I'm really excited for this fresh start. I'm really excited to have Alex on.
I'm glad to be here.
And with that being said, I think I'd like him to introduce the topic for our first episode back.
Today we're doing Doom, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And it's, I don't want to call it a remake, but the next Doom movie, which shares a lot of plot elements with it, but is not necessarily a straight-up remake, Doom Annihilation.
Yep, so that one's a direct-to-DVD and direct-to-streaming video on demand, so I wasn't expecting a lot from it. I am actually pretty excited to talk about it. I had fun with it. Can you give me your elevator pitch for the first movie? Tell me, if you were an executive pitching this movie, summarize it up for me real quick, and we'll get going and on the discussion.
Yeah, a bunch of badass space marines go into a research lab where they are testing a portal, or excuse me, they already have a portal that leads to Mars, and they find out that the scientists are up to no good, and they have to, which is funny because we're recording this during quarantine, or during the coronavirus quarantine. They have to go in and control an outbreak of, I don't know, I hesitate to say zombie, but it's very close. Demonized zombie rage virus that turns these research scientists into crazed, deformed maniacs. And the best part is the Space Marines are led by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Hey, this is when he was just The Rock.
Yeah, but I like saying Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I like doing the whole thing.
No, you can't do that. Legally, right. He was still The Rock, represented by WWE.
Mama Rock and Papa Rock. Well, keeping that in mind, led by The Rock, who, plot twist, turns out to not be the star of the movie.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, Karl Urban, for those who've listened to the podcast for a long time, I have always said that he was one of my most underrated, underappreciated actors. For a very long time on social media, absolutely. Every Monday we had a Man Crush Monday, and every single time we did Karl Urban, and had an open invitation for him to guest star on the podcast. I don't think it'll ever happen, but
Well, that's one tradition
really
we should
do
keep
like Karl
open.
Urban.
Let's keep that invitation open. I'd love to talk
I'll
about
start it again this Monday.
We can talk about the boys.
I do have to say, I worked at the movie theater when this movie came out in 2005. I loved it. I unabashedly loved this movie. I recognize there's some things that aren't good about it, but I watched this movie like every break and lunch when this was out in the movie theater, and I really, really enjoyed it. And like I said, I like The Rock. I like Karl Urban. And I was pumped to watch this. I've been meaning to rewatch this for quite a while. And I waited because I found out they were making a movie that came out in October of last year. But I found out they were making that movie about 1.5 years, 2 years before. So I held off watching Doom so I can watch it for the podcast. So I'm really excited we actually got to watch it.
Yeah, I saw this movie. It must have been when it came out, too. I definitely remember that first-person sequence that's trying to reimagine the game. And we're going to talk about that because...
Oh, for sure.
I don't know how much I like it anymore, but I had a good time with it when it first came out. And there's definitely a certain amount of charm to it. I think that they, for the most part, knew what they were doing as far as creating this, B movie.
Right.
With
and
more of a budget than they deserved.
The original plan was, so this movie cost about $60 million.
That's crazy.
It didn't even quite make that much money back in the United States. No. Like, it technically made a profit if you don't count advertising.
Which is funny because The Rock could do this now and it would make $60 million in the first weekend.
In the first weekend, absolutely. Now, this was he had done The Scorpion King, and I think he'd done like Gridiron Gang. He hadn't been in very many things yet, so I understand why. I mean, if you look at The Rock in this movie versus The Rock now, like,
it's crazy.
He's tiny compared to what he is now.
Yeah, little baby Rock.
It's weird. You would never think of somebody calling The Rock tiny, but in this one, he's seriously like half the size of what he is in when he's in the Fast and the Furious movies.
And what's funny is that he has gone from The Rock to Dwayne Johnson, but now he's more Rock-like than ever.
Yeah, dude, it's insane. Katrina and I were talking about it the other day, saying if they cast him as the Thing in the Fantastic Four reboot, they wouldn't have to CGI it. They could literally just like cement boulders to him, and he'd probably be fine.
To be clear, I really hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, I don't want him in it either. So what are some highlights of this movie for you? There were quite a few fun bits in here. There were quite a few kind of things that I found odd. But there's definitely some fun bits in here. But anything you really want to point out for this movie? One
of my favorite parts was the scientists wearing rubber lab coats in the beginning. Now, that might not be a common take, but I think the rubber lab coats were the way to go. I think that's pretty cool.
One of the things that I really liked was when Pinky, played by Dexter Fletcher, who's blowing up as a director, he finished Bohemian Rhapsody and he did Rocketman.
That's him.
I've really enjoyed both of these movies. But he plays Pinky, the guy who has the like robotic wheelchair that's just like instead of legs, he has like a gyro kind of 2 wheels, and he turns into the Pinky monster from the video game, and he's the part where they use the chainsaw to kill him. I actually really liked that little fight,
little Easter egg.
The other thing I really liked, or actually I didn't like, was and actually I told you about this. I wonder if you got it. I told you I had one major problem with this, and it was based off what year it takes place and a specific kill. Did you figure it out when you watched it?
No.
Okay, so they do this like big thing while they're going around the facility before they start getting attacked by all the creatures, but they find this like pit in the facility.
Oh yeah,
and a bunch of the guys are like, "What is this?" And one of the guys is like, "It's a prison holding cell." How do you know? And he like tells the guy to touch it, and it zaps him. So it's electrified. It's basically an electrified hole in the ground.
Yeah, it puts the lotion on the skin, but with electricity.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like one of those little pits. But later on in the movie, Destroyer, who's this like giant, like hulking black guy with who has like a Gatling gun with him, who's bigger than The Rock at this point. He ends up falling into that pit with one of the giant monsters who in the game would be a Hell Knight. In this, we don't have any names of any of the creatures or anything like that.
Right.
But he's down there fighting, and he's actually holding his own against this guy, but then he picks up a computer monitor, a CRT computer monitor, and starts swinging it around by the power cord like a mace or gale or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is supposed to be in 2046, and they have CRT computer monitors.
Yeah.
And then they use it as a weapon.
Yeah, that whole fight was pretty ridiculous.
It was insane.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear something interesting about this?
Sure.
So I thought it was a little weird. I think they did it on purpose, but they start off with their little, like, they're going to be going on vacation, and then the soldiers are told they don't get to go on vacation because they have to go to Mars. And fight this, that there's a quarantine going to go in effect and they have to manage the quarantine. So Karl Urban shows up and The Rock's like, no, you can sit this out, like it's fine. And he goes, no, we got to face the demons eventually. I know she's going to be there, but I got to move on. And then the whole time they're like talking about this girl and they make it think it's like a love interest. It turns out it's his sister, and his sister's played by Rosamund Pike. She turned down the role of Rita Skeeter for this movie in the Harry Potter franchise.
Wow.
Now, granted, she was also working on Pride and Prejudice, so it was this and Pride and Prejudice. But to turn down a Harry Potter movie for this, like, she ended up doing okay. She was in that Edgar Wright movie
she's in
with
Gone Girl,
Simon
too.
Pegg, The World Ends, and then she was in, of course, Gone Girl.
Yeah.
But Rita Skeeter,
I forgot that she was even
an
in
insane
this.
choice. Yeah,
Me
too.
One of my notes actually was that I think Karl Urban and Rosamund Pike are both good actors, and this movie makes them both look bad.
Yeah, they're not good in this. I mean, it's just the dialogue's terrible. So
Yeah.
I mentioned Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg were offered a fee to come in and punch up the script, and they both turned it down because the script was too bad.
That's insane.
They didn't want their name attached to it at all.
Yeah, the dialogue was pretty bad.
It's super bad. It's straight out of like a direct to sci-fi channel kind of movie. This movie was supposed to be made like 6 years earlier in 1999 with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it got canceled because two kids were playing with a chainsaw and got killed, and they said they learned it from the game. So they canceled the movie. It's weird that, like, when I saw that, at first I thought it was going to be Columbine because the Columbine shooters were known to have played Doom as well. But
Listen,
they actually canceled it because of the chainsaw accident.
every teenager that was, born between 1985 and 1995 played Doom at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I played... What's funny is, like, a lot of people complain about the story in this one, that it's a genetic experiment. So basically the premise of this movie
That's one of my
they
complaints.
found...
Are we getting into this?
Yeah, we could totally get into this. So the basic premise is they get to Mars and they find a skeleton that they're like, oh yeah, we looked at its DNA and we can tell that it was like 5 times stronger, 5 times smarter, 5 times faster, all these things.
Do they say 5?
I'm just throwing out a number. They whatever it was. They're stronger, faster, more intelligent, blah, 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 blah. And then they find out that, but in a small percentage of the population, it also makes them go crazy and mutate into terrifying monsters. So a lot of people were pissed about that.
Well, specifically, they say that if a person is good or evil, it exacerbates that tendency or whatever.
Because they say 10% of the human genome is unmapped, and they think that's the DNA for the soul.
Yeah, when she was going through that whole thing, I was rolling my eyes out of my fucking head.
Well, and that scene was just bad in general, because she pulls up, like, the genome, like, enough to fill up one monitor, which... the human genome is like, if you stretch it out, it's like miles long. It's hundreds of thousands of codes. And she has it pulled up on one screen, and she goes to Karl Urban, who they make this whole thing that their parents were scientists and their parents taught them both about DNA and genetics, but he went on to be a soldier. So he looks at it and he's like, my molecular genetics is a little rough, but that's an extra chromosome. It's like, how are you seeing that off of one thing? And then he makes a point and goes, humans only have 23 chromosomes. These aren't humans. They were found on Mars.
Yeah. Quick sidebar: their parents were killed in some archaeological dig accident on Mars or whatever. And there's a scene in this movie where Karl Urban looks out a window while looking at the archaeological dig, while audio of his memory of his parents dying in this horrible accident plays. He's just looking out a window while they play audio of this, which is in his head, which is like
saying the whole time, like, this is hell, and it's like, dude, your parents died in an accident. Like, I get you not liking the place, but to like say it's hell before seeing any monsters is kind of absurd.
And to bring it back around, that is sort of my chief complaint with both of these movies, is that they try to make it so sci-fi and so like science based. Actually, the second movie does hews a little bit closer to the game. But I want them to have a literal portal to hell where the armies of hell are waiting to destroy humanity. Which the second movie kind of does, but they take a long time to get there, and it's not convincing when it happens.
They do. And and obviously we'll talk about the second movie in a bit, where I kind of say, you know what, I give them a pass is for a couple reasons. One, if you play the games, and I went back and played a little bit of the original one because I have it on my Xbox, and I played a little bit of the 2016 one. When you play through those games, there is no story. Like, it is literally just you going from one place to the other, collecting keys to get to the exit and fighting monsters.
Sure.
All the story in these games are in the manual. So, like, the original one, like Doom 1 and 2, the story is entirely in the manual. It's not in the gameplay. And then in Doom 3, there's a little bit more story element. In Doom 2016, there is no actual storyline other than like if you read every single like diary and journal entry, you can kind of get it.
I think they built it in more in Doom 2016, but I take your point.
What was that?
I think they built more of a story in Doom 2016. You could just avoid.
You could just
avoid all of it.
Every single thing.
You could just avoid all of it if you wanted to. But
if you just play the game and don't go for all the collectibles, like you're gonna miss the story. Like there isn't an actual narrative that's being built. Yes, they absolutely developed the lore. Like if you look at the different timelines and the journals and stuff, you actually find out that this Doom guy's been going for quite a while. But that's only if you're reading all these things. Like you should be able to get a plot of a story by just playing the game from beginning to end and not going on all the side quests and collectible things, because they're not even side quests. It's just like finding all the secret entrances to find all the recordings and whatnot. So like the Doom games really, and once again, this is coming from somebody who likes them, and I'm really looking forward to the new game. That there really isn't much of a story unless you go and research it and look for the story. So I kind of do give it a little bit of a pass to an extent.
Yeah, I guess so. I see what you're saying, but I still think that choosing this, like, the mutated scientist versus an army of, or, a small squad of space marines.
Right. And they could have changed it where it's like,
hey, we found,
like, oh, I'm sorry, bud.
I think that choosing this, like, mutated scientist versus this little squad of space marines is the, like, laziest and most boring version of the idea that you could come up with for Doom. You know what I mean?
Right.
I want to see,
fair. And
I want to see actual demons and
they could
and really just one guy.
I
don't want a squad of marines. I want just the one guy for most of the movie.
Right. I do agree. I think having a few guys die to demonstrate that these things are gnarly to make that hero look even better is kind of a good idea. But I think like could have bridged the gap between demons and just like mutated scientists, because in the newer game there are people who are possessed by demon spirits that just slightly mutate. So it's not that far off, but they could have mentioned that, like, hey, we found these, like, demon-looking things, and they experimented with, like, demon DNA to justify it, as opposed to it just being an extra chromosome and there's good versus evil.
Yeah, maybe it's just more about the ratio of these things, because in this first movie, and kind of in the second one, but we're talking about the first one, in this first movie, it's kind of it is all mutated scientists, And I think in the games, in the new game anyway, if there's mutated scientists, they're a relatively low percentage. There's tons of like ridiculous hell demons with or hell beasts, whatever, with all these like fantastic creature designs, and we don't really even get a hint of that in these movies. Well, these movies are just like, here's the mutated scientist and maybe one other monster, and that's it. And that's what they should focus on, I think.
Well, and the thing is this they actually had three or four different ones. So you had like your generic zombie looking ones, which were the mutated scientists. You had imps, which were the ones that killed the majority of the scientists, and then the Hell Knight was the one that Destroyer fought, and in the pit. He's also the one that killed Mac, who just like swiped him and his head went flying off.
I'll tell you, those all looked like three different stages of the same creature. Like,
yeah, they were
like
too
Alien.
Similar. Right, I agree. They were too similar, but they were supposed to be different creatures. And for the most part, they're always in the dark. You can barely see them. Yeah. So that was the biggest issue I had.
Both these movies really relied heavily on Alien and Aliens, which is
fine, I agree. But like the one that bothered me the most was like when Portman died. He's the guy who played the guy who killed Batman's parents in the Christopher Nolan ones.
Joe Chill.
Yeah, Joe Chill. He is Chill. He's supposed to be, his name is Portman, and he like gives the rookie kind of guy drugs because he's nervous, and he also like sexually harasses all the women in quarantine. Like he's supposed to be an unlikable person, so he's kind of set up as the guy that you want to see really get it. And his death was like one of the least satisfying ones. Like you don't even see the monster, like you just see a hand come out of a vent and just swing him around, and he just hits the wall a couple times and he's dead.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like, how are you gonna not show a monster kill this guy? Like, that was a little lame.
Yeah, that's another missed opportunity, is like doing these ridiculous kills that only these monsters or these demons are capable of. And no, it's just like,
and you can't even see him do it.
Yeah, and they just end up being these like Hollywoodized Hong Kong, action sequences, sort of like cheap American versions of what should be a cool fight scene, which don't even apply to Marines and shit.
Well, yeah, and then I agree with that entirely. And then it's just like at the end, and I get to like your point of like we need to have the one guy who's the hero, our Doom guy, which is what everyone just calls the guy, the character you play as in Doom.
You mean John?
They just
Grim
immediately
Reaper?
start John Grim Reaper. Yeah, they just start killing everybody, just boom, 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 like that. Nothing. So the black guy, I can't remember his name, but Duke. I think his name is Duke. he just gets killed by being pulled through a floor grate.
Yeah.
You don't even see anything. He just gets pulled, and then The Rock, as like a twist, gets pulled through like a nano wall, which is super inconsistent in this movie how they work. But he gets pulled through, and he's like, "I'm not supposed to die." And there's like a swarm on him, yet he comes back like totally fine. Like
Yeah.
I don't understand why.
Which
they wanted a boss, and they wanted to give The Rock something to do. But
to be fair, that is
actually
the most clever part of the movie.
Yeah. The Rock was supposed to be the lead. He was offered the lead role, but he thought Sarge was a more interesting character, so he took the secondary role as opposed to being the lead in the movie.
Well, I mean,
then that leads.
He is the lead up until that point, and then you realize that Karl Urban's
Karl Urban is still billed first over The Rock.
I mean, The Rock. I feel like The Rock has more screen time and more lines up to that point.
I thought so, but I went back through and looked at it, and it's pretty even. You see a lot more of the team ups with. Karl Urban has like a scene with every single character going through the team ups. Like he has a point with the kid and he gets mad at him for being high, and he's with Duke in one part, he's with Mac in another part. So
okay, well let me say it like this, and that's fair, and I'm crediting their little sleight of hand there. But your impression is that The Rock is the lead up until that point.
I don't think so.
Really?
I would disagree with that.
I mean, I think that's what they're trying to trick you into thinking, and I think it works.
I think in 2005 he wasn't at that point because he'd really only done like the Scorpion King and
that's fair.
The Mummy too. So but now granted, Karl Urban wasn't a big name. He had done the Lord of the Rings movies. He had done Pathfinder at this point. He had been in like Hercules, the TV show. But the story is very much about his journey. And then you get to the point
I just mean that Sarge is the one that is moving the story along and making decisions.
He is, and like until you get to a certain point where the Karl Urban's character Grimm is trying to convince people to disobey his orders, and then it goes,
which is after.
South.
Oh no, it's right before he gets killed.
Right before he gets C24, and that's really lame that they call this serum just C24 or chromosome 24.
I mean, that's
it.
This whole movie, man. This whole movie is missed opportunities. It's base hits when it should have been triples.
We're not really saying anything positive about this film, really. Like, we're pretty much only saying negative things. Just keep in mind, I still enjoyed this movie a lot. I had a blast watching this film, and I'm definitely going to watch it again.
I feel like this is interesting because we watched the requel after this. This movie is, I think, solidly in so bad it's good territory.
Yeah, I give it that. It's very entertaining, and it's very corny and whatnot.
Yeah, it's not quite The Room, but it's a fun watch with buddies and a little bit of alcohol.
It's not on that level. But I think we need to get into the first person scene and then start wrapping it up and moving into the next one. But that first person scene in 2005, I fucking loved it.
I did too.
Loved it in 2005.
I
still liked it this time around, but I did have a couple issues.
So boring.
I didn't think it was boring. What I didn't like about it was almost like the House of the Dead kind of video games or Time Crisis, like the ones that you go to the arcade for, and you'll see like bad guys pop up and they just kind of stand there for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And they don't attack to give you a chance to attack, so you don't get overwhelmed. So there's plenty of times where he goes and he does some crazy kills against Hell Knights and imps and everybody else. But then every once in a while he'll turn a corner and there's just a zombie there going like,
yeah, they smile too. It's like being in a haunted house.
Yeah, smart. And then he turns another corner. There's another one just holding an axe, and he shoots the hand, and the axe falls on the head. And it's like, why are these things just standing there and not doing anything?
Yeah, and also this scene is supposed to be like, all right, we're doing Doom. This is what you've been waiting for. It's just like the game. And then an axe falls on a guy's head. Where in the game is that? Like, do all the cool shit from the game. Get some fucking. He should have gotten some crazy guns.
They do get a lot of the stuff. Like he does get the chainsaw. He does get the flamethrower. He does use the shotgun at a certain point. Like you get all the major weapons. You get all that stuff. I still think it's a fun scene. I think it was also weird how it ends. Like I feel like they should have ended with him coming to a door, and then it cuts to the other side of the door and the door opening and see him, because it does this weird thing where it kind of pans out around him, and it's kind of awkward.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a bunch of really obvious cuts in it too, where it feels like it should be a one take. And they did their best.
So there's 15 cuts in this that they, digitally tried to smooth out to make it look like it was a single take. But 15 cuts overall.
They could have tried a lot harder.
Yeah. So the end of the movie just ends up being one of those generic, like, beat 'em up kind of. It happens a lot in movies where the good guy and the bad guy come up, hey, how many rounds you've got? Just one. And they both like fire their shot so that way they can do, the fisticuffs.
Right.
And it's the fight scene's really not that great. I do believe back then in a movie like this, you could have Karl Urban fight The Rock. If that movie was made today, I'd be like, nope, not going to happen.
And it also just like, first of all, I don't think it should be a fist fight. That's not why I'm at a Doom movie. I'm at a Doom movie for like crazy gun stuff. It should hew a lot closer to John Wick.
Although the newer Doom 2016, there's a lot of melee stuff. Like the melee stuff is actually the most satisfying thing in the new Doom games.
But I mean, that might be true, but I still don't want to see a brawler fist fight in a Doom movie.
Yeah,
it's
no,
just
I
not
agree.
Interesting to me.
I'm glad they didn't do that part in first person, the final fight.
And they also had them like soaring through the air, like majestically and stuff. It's like Crouching Tiger, Hidden bullshit.
Yeah, and that was a little weird. Yeah, the last fight was a little dumb. And the other thing I had, and this is an issue I have with every zombie movie in general, but when they got to like that last base where all the people went to hide, you just see hallways of like people who just have a little bit of blood on them. But like every death we had seen so far had been grisly, limbs ripped off, heads ripped off.
Yeah.
Terrible, terrible grisly ones. Like, how come all these people were just like dead? It's the same thing like in zombie movies. You see all these zombies and it's like they only ever got like one bite on them. It's a little weird. It always bothers me when you see, things like this. And like even the zombies in here that did change, like they all only had like, maybe a hand ripped off or an ear ripped off or something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like these they're not demons, but they would do a lot more damage.
Yeah. There's a point where they say, one of the guys says like, where are we? And they're on Mars at this point. And somebody else says, couple million light years from breakfast.
Nope.
Mars is not a couple million light years or even
not even 1 light year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can get there in about 18 months.
Not only is it not a couple million, it's not a single light year. You can just go
there. That's what I say. It's not a single one. We can get there.
It's a stone's
at our
throw.
Current technology in less than a year. It's like 18. I think it's 6 months to get there or something like that. 6 to 9 months.
Yeah. So that seemed like a gross overstep in the writing there. There's also there's a bunch of these lines. I think just in the first half of the movie, but they kept on saying stuff like "face your demons," where you're talking about like metaphorical demons, but then like wink wink, we're talking about real demons because it's Doom. And then someone else also says like, I think The Rock says "game time." So there's all these like weak little video game references or like clever lines.
And I think I specifically didn't talk about the BFG. Yeah. Because I wanted to compare the two after we talk about the second movie.
Yeah,
but the BFG is definitely different in each one. But
I said, hey, what's going on?
So what have you been up to, bud? What we're going to be doing now is we're going to want you guys, your listeners, to kind of get to know us a little bit better and find out other things we like. So we're creating a segment that's just called So what have you been up to, bud? And Alex, what have you been watching, the last couple weeks besides the podcast movies?
I've been self-quarantining myself just a little bit. So I've actually been watching a lot of Parks and Rec. I started rewatching that a couple weeks ago, and I'm just blasting through it at this point.
Excellent.
Yeah. Let's see, what else? I watched Quantum of Solace last week because we watched the Bond movies.
Yeah, and I was going to bring this up in the news segment, but I'll just touch on it briefly. We originally recorded an episode on Bond, but then the movie got pushed to November. So this is our new first episode. But we watched a bunch of Bond movies, but I actually finally got on that BoJack Horseman train.
Oh man, it's so good.
And I've tried to watch it like 3 times over the last 4 or 5 years, but I finally committed to it, and I got 3 episodes in, and it kind of clicked.
Yeah. And
I watched all 6 seasons over the last 2.5, 3 weeks.
So I started rewatching that recently because I did not see all of season 5, and I haven't started season 6 yet because I didn't finish season 5. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch it from the beginning. I've loved that show since it first premiered, and I guess I didn't revisit it because it tends to be very heavy, so it's easy to put down if you're not in the right headspace. So I recently rewatched all of it. It's definitely
heavy.
Got halfway through season 5 and had to put it down again for a minute. And I'm probably going to finish season 5 and do season 6 right after I finish Parks, now that we're on, lockdown here in the U.S.
Yeah, I've been watching. So I watched all of BoJack Horseman in about 2.5, 3 weeks. We've been watching McMillions on HBO.
Yeah,
fantastic documentary about the scandal and the fraud around the monopoly at McDonald's. So that's been really good. And Katrina and I have been wanting to watch Halt and Catch Fire
I heard that's
for years, and we finally started getting this. We're like 3 or 4 episodes in, but that's what we've been doing.
I also watched I rewatched Under the Skin last week, and that movie is still fantastic.
Oh, that's right, you were telling me about that.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I want to, but I don't know. I I feel like that's a movie you have to pay attention to. You shouldn't be like on your phone or whatever. And I just haven't had the time in a while to just completely be able to say I'm just going to watch this thing.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of why I like to go to the movies. Is I will never have my phone out during a movie.
Right.
I focus on that. I did watch Bad Boys 3. It wasn't as bad as it looked, but it wasn't good. It definitely felt like it should have come out 15 years ago.
Let me say something about Under the Skin, because that's interesting that you say that. And I feel like the first thing that comes to mind when you say you want to pay attention to it fully is that you're going to miss plot points or something. And that's not an issue with this movie. This movie has like 3 plot points, but it's like a poem. Like you want to experience the whole thing and be fully immersed in it. You're not going to miss any information.
Visually, it's really interesting.
Want to be there for the whole thing. Be present.
Yeah, and that's what I've heard. Like, same thing. My buddy Dustin, who used to be a host on this show, got me Mandy for Christmas with Nicolas Cage, and I didn't watch that until about a month ago. And it's been on my list on Shudder to watch for like 2 years. And I'm like, I know it's a batshit insane movie, but I know visually it's really interesting, and I know it's a really artsy film. I'm like, I need to be in a headspace where I can just sit there and devote watching it. So, like,
how did you
certain
like
movies
that?
I want to be in that space. I need to watch it again. I didn't hate it. It didn't make any sense to me. I definitely like uncaged Nick Cage.
All of my friends absolutely loved it, and I tried to watch it for Halloween. And it's not a Halloween movie, so that's my bad. But it just did not grab me at all. And I bought it, so I own it, and I need to get back around to it. But we'll probably just lost a handful
it's interesting.
of listeners for that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but I need to like watch it again. I wasn't really sure what I was expecting, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, well, maybe one of these weeks you and I can both watch it, and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I've also been watching the new Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is fucking incredible. And Vanderpump Rules, man. New season, it's pretty good. I thought I wasn't going to watch it, but it's actually turned out to be pretty good. Jax is a huge piece of shit.
I don't watch like those reality shows. I've tried to watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. But and this is like, I love Seinfeld. I rewatched Seinfeld about a year ago. Fucking loved it from beginning to end. But Larry David, I kind of got turned off to him a couple years back. There was this show. I don't know. It was one of the networks, but basically it was like, let's say you and I, Alex, had some beef, and we wanted our argument settled. We'd go on this show, and 3 celebrities would hear our arguments, and they would decide how to settle the argument. So the first episode had Larry David on it, and there was a woman who was saying like, my husband is a slob. He doesn't do anything in the house. He doesn't take care of the lawn. He doesn't do any of the repairs. He doesn't pay for anything. Like, basically, like, this husband was a piece of shit. And so she was like, I've tried all this. We went to couples counseling. We did everything we possibly could. And this guy's just an asshole. He thinks it's funny to not do the things that I ask him to do. So I told him I'm not interested in sex with him anymore until he can start acting like an adult and help around the household. And Larry David had this thing where he goes, he sided with the guy immediately before hearing any of the arguments. Like, before they actually did the whole thing, it was just like, here's the summary of the case. He was like, I just got to tell you, I'm going to side with your husband. It was my understanding when you get married, you get sex whenever you want it. And I was just like, oh, I know he's trying to be funny, but he's also like, that comes from a place of truth. And I don't know. Ever since then, I've been kind of turned off by him anytime I see him on anything.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm not gonna argue with you there, but you're missing out. It's a great show.
Yeah, I hear, and I've watched a couple episodes about a year and a half ago, and I'm like, it just seems like it's a bunch of people being assholes, which I like a lot of shows like that. Like, I love It's Always Sunny. But I liked BoJack Horseman, and it's a bunch of people being assholes. But I don't know. Maybe I'll give it a shot again someday. Yeah. But
it feels like you have a bad taste in your mouth about Larry David, which
I definitely do.
Yeah, I mean, if you do, you do. But I feel like if you also like Seinfeld and Always Sunny and BoJack, then the humor in Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Right, and I know that if I didn't have that issue with Larry David, I probably would like the show a lot.
Well, maybe we can get Larry David on the show, and you guys can sort of hash it out. So let's put out another open invitation to Larry David. Come on the show, explain yourself, and or convince Mike to watch a few episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and we'll figure this thing out, man. Larry,
you know what? I'm open to that open invitation. I'm fine with it. Yeah. So, Karl Urban, Larry David, if you're listening, welcome anytime.
I'm
Hit
sure
us
we'll
up
think
on
of another
Instagram
one
or Twitter or
episode.
Facebook. Yeah. I'll give the elevator. I will give the elevator pitch / summary of the newer one. So this one was direct to DVDs, direct to video on demand. I could not find a budget for this anywhere, so it definitely seems like it was low budget. But The basic pitch for this one, and I've actually read about how the guy pitched it. The guy who wrote and directed this film was trying to get it made for like 5 years, and Universal kept saying no, and then the 2016 game blew up and was one of the biggest games of the year, and then they're like, okay, here's $50 million. Like, here, or I don't even know if it's $50 million. It's probably not, but they're like, here's some money, go. Bethesda, who now owns the Doom rights, wanted nothing to do with the movie. They didn't want any design, and they said, you can't use anything from the 2016 game. You have to use the older games for this. So the basic pitch of this one is, hey, we're going to send a bunch of people to Mars. There's a teleporter from Earth to Mars. We need to figure out how to make that work. And there's an evil scientist that's kind of running it, and a bunch of disgraced space marines are going to show up right as the experiment happens and fight monsters. And this one, like Alex said earlier, it is closer to the original. These very well could be aliens. They could be demons. They could be from hell. It isn't explicitly said, but there are some interesting things with like language and some symbols and everything that, you know, these could be demons. They could be aliens. They kind of say it's both, and they're very non-committal to it.
Yeah, I fell asleep a lot during this movie.
That's funny because it's like it's super short, and I went through it. Like I had to watch part of it on my lunch, on my phone, and then I also watched it on my phone.
That is the perfect way to watch this movie.
Yeah, so I broke out, and where I watched it, like the breaks when I had to stop on my lunch, actually was at a pretty good point. It was like right after the first range of like attacks on the people, so it ended up being like a good breaking point for me to watch it. But this movie is weird in that it tries to be very similar to the game, while also trying to not be similar to the game at all. Like they have a lot of like nods to the game, with like the clunky colored key cards, which look exactly like the ones in the games. Yep. They had like interesting, like they had some creature designs. Like there was really just one, like they had like Hell Knights, and then they had like zombie things that kind of looked like weird orcs. So was there only 2 monster types in this movie?
Is the Hell Knight the one at the end with that like has fire inside of it?
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
No, so like the ones that were just like shooting fire at them throughout, like were kind of, I don't really know
imps.
if they were Hell Knights.
No, those are imps.
Yeah, if they're just imps, and then maybe the last one is a Hell Knight, but you know that's not necessarily accurate to any designs. But yeah, so there really was only like 2 that they had to fight with any kind of regularity.
Yeah.
But yeah, this movie just, I don't know. What are some highlights for you? I've got a lot of things to say.
Oh, I don't know if I have any
I want to
highlights.
hear from you before I rant.
Yeah, I mean, I think this movie tried to hew closer to the games, even though they're required to hew closer to the earlier games, which I think the way that legally works out is that they had the rights to the ID years of the game, or the games that were produced by the ID studio, and then it's sold to Bethesda, so Bethesda could say, hey, you can't use the new game. But anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So like there was a point where on Twitter people asked Bethesda like, hey, what's your role in the game? And they're just like, we have nothing to do with it. Like they distanced themselves from it immediately. Yeah. And then in interviews, people kept bringing up that tweet to the director, like, hey, what do you think about that tweet? And they're like, you know what? He's like, I get it. Like they're protecting their creation, but we gave them every opportunity. We asked them to be involved in the script. We asked them to be involved in the cast, and we asked them to be involved in the creature design, and they said no.
Well, listen, it's the same thing as Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg. Like, there's just no way that this movie was going to be terribly interesting for what I assume
right. Well,
the
and they were
budget
also working on the new game, the game that's coming out this year.
Yeah.
So it's like they don't really probably have the resources, because at any given time Bethesda's working on like an Elder Scrolls game.
Right.
They're working on a Fallout game, and they're working on Doom, and they're also working on the Wolfenstein games. So like
the budget for the new Bethesda game was probably more than this movie. You know what I mean?
Probably more than double.
Yeah. So there's no, yeah, absolutely. So there's no, like, it makes perfect sense to me why they wouldn't want to lend their name to something that is going to be less ambitious, or just a smaller project, essentially. Like, what's the point?
Right. So I'm just going to just lump all these things in one go, the Easter eggs in this, at least the ones that, you know, I was able to find, and some of them I looked up. But this one really tried to be like, wink, wink, nod, nod. Like, look at how much we know about the game. But like they had the first dead guy they found was William Blazkowicz, which is the character from Wolfenstein.
Hell yeah.
They had the heads-up display with the map. They also had the super shotgun that the captain had. That was pretty cool. They also had the name of the the AI is actually the name of, this is something you'd only find if you really deep dive into the lore of the games, but Doom Guy has a pet rabbit. The AI had the same name as the pet rabbit from Doom Guy. And then the last one that I really found was Dr. Carmack, who's in both movies.
Right.
There's a character named Dr. Carmack. And this one, it's just a dead scientist they find. In the original Doom from 2005, it's the scientist that they interact with quite a bit and then turns into an imp and rips his ear off.
Yeah, which, by the way,
Carmack,
I got issues with ripping your ear off like that.
Yeah, it's... yeah. Carmack is the last name of one of the co-founders of ID Games, so that's where that's in. And then the last one, Easter egg, and this one kind of bothered me, was there's a point where one of the Marines says, "I'm your ultra nightmare," which is a reference to the hardest difficulty of the games. You can only get to that difficulty if you beat what you think is the highest difficulty, and then you unlock it. But that character says it, and then immediately a zombie thing drops from out of nowhere, lands on his shoulders, and kills the guy instantly. It's like, how are you going to have him say this thing and not kill a couple people? It's, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah, I would. I wasn't a fan of anything that was going on here.
Did you catch the lead's name?
No.
So the lead character's name is Joan Dark, which is supposed to be a play on words of Joan of Arc.
Yeah, well, because the director said that she's based on Joan of Arc, so it's like,
right?
Yeah, Joan.
I don't see it.
Joan d'Arc.
Yeah, Joan Dark.
But also Dark is
like
cool.
hold the door, hold the door, hold the door, hold door, hold door.
Yeah,
kind of situation.
Yeah, I did see that that's her name, and that's I thought it was fucking dumb. Also, did you notice that all of the pretty well, not even just all the Space Marines, but a lot of the actors in this movie look like they're played by actors that would play them in a pornographic remake of this film.
Yeah, well,
there was like a knockoff Michael Shannon, a knockoff Olivia Munn, knockoff Liam Hemsworth. They had them all.
They had a knockoff. What's her name? She's in everything right now. Ruby Rose.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The French
right.
chick was like a knockoff. Yeah, she was like a knockoff Ruby Rose.
Yeah, it was crazy.
What was weird about this movie is like the acting was atrocious from everybody. Now there were definitely people who were worse than others, and I don't know if part of this was bad acting or bad writing or a combination of both, but there's a character who's a scientist named Dr. Bennett who dated Joan at some point, and he is going on this mission with them just because he basically needed a ride to the base. So they were going anyway, so they ended up lumping together. But there's so many times where as they're figuring out what's going on, they figure out that the bad guy kind of knew that there were demons. They heard monsters on recordings. As they're finding out more and more and more that this guy is an evil fuck, there are certain times where the scientist guy, Dr. Bennett, who's the lead's ex, like seems to like admire him and everything. So the whole movie makes it seem like maybe this guy's in it because he conveniently finds the emergency exit that can get them into the base, and he conveniently can figure out how much power everything has, even though he says he's never been there and has never worked at the base or any base like that. And he just explains like, well, I knew I was going to be here, so I just started reading about the base. But it's supposed to be a top secret base, yet he keeps finding things.
Yeah.
So the whole movie, I thought, like, oh, he's a bad guy. He knows everything that's going on. But then he wasn't. And I couldn't tell if it was just like they were trying to do a twist or if he's just a bad actor or what.
Yeah, I like the first time that happens, they land at the base and they can't get in because there's a demon outbreak happening at the moment. And, the people inside the base are busy taking care of that or whatever. And then he pipes up and he's like, oh, well, there's an emergency hatch directly below the ship. And the pilot like activates a below ship camera and finds it. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Wow, that's crazy. And he says what you said, oh, I knew I was going to be here. So I like to read. I read a book about the base or whatever, which is all silly.
Yeah,
anyway.
it's
but
crazy.
then on top of that, the pilot of the ship just like activates a little...
He's discount Danny McBride.
Yeah, exactly. He just activates a little tunnel that comes out and just happens to be directly above the door. Like he didn't know that was there, but it happened to be exactly where he parked the
right where he needed it.
The tunnel that was going to open up to let them into the thing. I know that's nitpicking, but when it happened, I was just like,
no, I agree. And like, there's certain things that were like the set design, like it seemed really cheap. And then there's like one point where they go down into the base and like it's like generic like plumbing and everything. Like, okay, this makes sense on like a moon base that they'd have to have it in completely encapsulated and whatnot. So there's plumbing and pipes and everything. And they move into another room and it looks like it's the same kind of thing, but there's just vines all over the place, but they definitely look fake. Like they look like things I've seen in escape rooms, or like the vines that you can go and buy from Michael's that are plastic and strung. Like it
It's
looks
exactly
like
what they are.
yeah, it looks like a shitty escape room or like
Yeah.
this weird like if you were building a haunted house out in your backyard for like Halloween kids.
I
Like,
don't know why
they're
they
set to
thought
just-
they could do this movie for whatever their budget was. It
It
looks
was
like it's like
weird, and
15
then-
million, if that.
The biggest issue I had with this movie was like the inconsistency with like how the monsters would fight. So, you know, we see like 3 or 4 people die instantly. Like there's the zombie things, which I think they only had like one zombie mask mold because every zombie looked the same. Like bald blue, slightly elf-like ears. They were all wearing lab coats and khaki pants kind of thing. So they all looked exactly the same. But all the time you'd see them running super fast and, you know, rip a person's throat out or stab them in the ribs and kind of thing with their hands. But when Joan's around them, she can go hand to hand with them. She can fight them, and then periodically one of the other guys would be able to do it. But for every like 2 or 3 deaths you would get one person who could fight them for a little bit, and that didn't make sense. But the one that was most egregious, there's a point where one of the soldiers is climbing a ladder, and there's a zombie who's chasing up, who seems to be struggling to climb the ladder. Meanwhile, the camera like pans out, and you get a wide shot of like a zombie like parkouring across like that warehouse, and then like parkours to the top and kills the guy as soon as he gets to the top of the ladder. And it's like, how is this one struggling to climb the ladder, but the other one's parkouring across the entire warehouse?
Yeah, I mean, that all checks out with the rest of the movie to me. Just inconsistent.
It drove me crazy.
Yeah,
And then when like
lazy.
you finally get to the imps, like you just see like a vagina open up out of their chest and a fireball just kind of like plops in their hands.
Is that what happens? I
super
thought they were
weird.
manifesting it out of the air. I didn't see the chest
No,
vagina.
like their chest like opens up a little bit. Like their chest starts to glow and like it expands just a little bit and like it kind of like falls out of their chest. It's super weird. And then you see it again kind of at the end of the movie. The doctor it's like
he just
Bertiger or
force
something
pushes
like
her.
that. Yeah, he just magically has these powers. But so by the way, his last name is German for cheater, and he's supposed to be German.
Yeah.
But he at the end, like she shoots him, and he goes, "I'm already dead," and opens it, and he has like a vagina in his chest, just like the demons do.
Oh, I assume that was just like a wound or something. I didn't realize the demons had
Yeah,
that
no,
too.
it was clearly what it was supposed to be. Like he was killed and then like resurrected, but it's in the exact same spot that the others like channel their fire out of.
Hey, can
Which even the fire was super, like it wasn't consistent at all. Like sometimes the fire kills them in one hit, and sometimes it sends them flying. Like
yeah.
no consistency on anything in this movie.
Can we talk about the teleportation devices in both of these movies? Because in the first movie,
Yes.
there's just like a little a drop
Bubble.
of water that comes floating up out of the ground, and then you get sucked into it, and that shoots you out to Mars, which, you know, feels like a 2005 Hollywood. Oh, this seems
Yeah.
cool. Let's do this. I know it's not like the games, but it's cool. Digital, you know, CGI technology. Let's do that thing.
Right.
Whatever. You know, I can forgive that. This one really makes a point of trying to seem like the games, where there's, you know, glowing runes on a mysterious old pedestal that, you know,
Yeah,
and this
and
like
it's like
blood substance like lights
yeah,
up,
it's
and you
weird.
have to walk through it and stuff. But at the same time, all these like scientists that are watching the teleportation you know, pedestal or device light up and fill with a column of blood and start to do its thing are like in a state of awe and like hopeful awe about what's about to happen. They're like, wow, you know, this is a huge step forward for mankind. This is crazy, and da da da. It's literally a screaming column of blood. You're not worried about
Well, it's
this
also-
at all.
They also basically took the plot of Stargate, like what they want Stargate to be. So they go and say, like later on, the evil scientist goes, "Hey, maybe the teleportation was an instant. Like even though it's perceived to be instant to us, maybe it wasn't." And it turns out it isn't. You go in and you're actually in either some alternate dimension or an alien planet, or you're in hell. Once again,
I think they
super
actually,
vague. They don't really commit to either.
yeah, I think Wikipedia says it's actually hell, but
Yeah.
I wish the
So,
movie
and
was
the
clearer.
director says it's at the hell scene, but it was in quotes. But they also say at one point, like, there's one character throughout the whole movie is like, "I think there's extraterrestrial life, and we haven't done it." And he's like, "I knew it." And like one of the scientists kind of says like, "Oh yeah, you know, maybe they specifically say we found one on Mars, we found one on Earth, so it's absurd for us not to think that these would be found on, you know, hundreds if not thousands of planets." So it also makes it seem like they're trying to think it is aliens, but it just kind of fits our definition of hell when you go there visually, and the fire and the demons and everything. So it's like it's a little bit of having its cake and eating it too.
Yeah, that's another point what I was talking about earlier, where they're like, yeah, it's not necessarily hell. It's these like hellish demonic creatures that sort of seeded life on Earth and then want to take it out. I think that's kind of what was going on. But again, I just want it to be a literal portal to hell. I think that's awesome.
Right. So I really only have like 2 more kind of points. So I have 2 examples for one of the points, but one of the things I thought was weird is just like there were certain times where things were almost cheerful and laughable. So there's a point when they find some survivors, and while they're finding the survivors, like one of the like a monster shows up, and this survivor is like almost like it's too nonchalantly bordering on cheerful when like a zombie pops up and they shoot, and she's like, "That's what I was trying to tell you. We have a situation." Like almost like Rob Schneider is delivering the line.
Yeah.
And then a zombie comes out of nowhere and bites her, even though there's soldiers like in a line in like a semicircle supposed to be containing the situation. Like, where did this zombie come from? And why was this person so cheerful? And she's like, "Oh, I got to tell you about this emergency." But then like the first time we see the ones that can shoot fire, there's a point where Joan is in like a control room. Oh, she's in the ship, and she's she's checking on the pilot, and you see like this, like the imp kind of like skip out, like almost prances out before it like cuts to black, almost as if there was supposed to be like a commercial break, like they thought this might be a TV movie. I don't know. But like there's just all these weird like things where like the creatures prance. It's super weird.
Yeah, and it just doesn't feel like the game. You know, for somebody who's clearly so concerned with making references to the game and making this more of a Doom movie than the first one, it doesn't feel like it at all.
No, and I think we're at that point where we should talk about the BFG and then start wrapping up.
Well,
so
both movies. Let me jump back really quick. After everything that we've talked about, one of my least favorite things about this movie is that the Universal logo at the beginning of the movie, the production company logo that is the Earth with Universal written in front of it, is not Mars in this movie. And I think that's absolute
that's an
bullshit,
easy thing to
adjust. Missed opportunity, and it made me hate the movie immediately.
That's fair. That's a really valid criticism, and I'm on board with it.
And they did that shit in the first movie.
Yeah, that's valid. I totally feel you on that.
I think literally there's the Universal logo, and then it like fades to black, and then the next shot is actually of Mars. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's what's funny is they definitely do these kind of things. Like they did it in the first one, but also like you look at Flintstones movie.
Yeah,
they did Pangea.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Universal's totally cool with changing their logo for movies. Yeah,
they literally did it for another movie in this franchise. They did it for the last movie.
Fuck this movie.
Yeah.
I
saw that shit come up and I was like, oh, I'm not in good hands.
If I don't know if TV Guide still does this because I haven't had a TV Guide since the 90s, but they had the jeers and cheers. That would definitely be a jeer.
Yeah. Yeah, that was on my jeers list. Oh, there's another moment in this movie, by the way, where they're like the Space Marines are like gearing up for their mission or whatever. It's towards the beginning, and one of the guys goes, "You know what this is, right?" And everyone's like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "This is aliens. We're doing aliens." And that was, I understand what the writer director was trying to do there, but it was so on the nose and executed in such a snarky way that it did not come off as charming or anything.
And they really did basically copy aliens. Yeah, that's bad.
Which is fine. I don't even care that they're doing aliens, and it's also kind of Die Hard. And I don't care that they're doing that at all.
Don't call it out.
Or if you're going to call it out, make it clever.
Yeah.
Or funny, something.
I don't know. So in both movies, they kind of have like a Chekhov's gun kind of scenario with the BFG. So there's a point early in the 2005 movie where they kind of see it, like they see the specs for it, and The Rock ends up being like, "Oh, I want that gun," and he tries to get into the locker that it's in, and he can't, and eventually he uses the severed hand that he finds to get in. And that gun it's not like the game. The game is a green blast, but in that one, it has like that damage. It was satisfying. It like blows a hole in the wall.
It feels like a big fucking gun.
Right. In this one, they both say big fucking gun in it. This one, it was super inconsistent. Like she holds it, and there was times where it was like it just knocked people back. Like the entire time she was on Earth, it just knocked people back. But then in Mars, it was just destroying dozens at a time.
Yeah.
And then she shoots the Hell Knight like once with it, and it like cripples it, and then she ends up like taking the cartridge out and using it like a grenade, and just like destroys every demon in one go. Like it made it like the demons really didn't matter. Like it was too easy. But like the gun, like this one had the green blast, but at some points it just seemed like a force push. And other times, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Let me sum up how I felt about the BFG in this movie. I nodded off during the part where she discovered that she found the BFG or whatever. So I don't even remember what you're talking about, where she was like, "Oh, this is the BFG. It's a big fucking gun or whatever. And the next time I saw her with it, I just assumed that she had a laser rifle, because that's what it looked like.
Yeah, and like it's a very quick scene. So they go to they find the secret lab that has the BFG, and they use the key from William Blazkowicz, which is of course the Wolfenstein character, and she's able to get in, and she tells Bennett like, yeah, this is the BFG 9000, blah blah blah, and explains what it is. But Marines just call it the big fucking gun, and then like they go.
Yeah, and
it's dumb.
And I'm saying, when she used it, when I saw her using it, it didn't feel like a big fucking gun. It was just
no,
like,
it doesn't. It's super
pew,
weird.
pew.
Like it only. And it's just, my biggest thing was inconsistency. The inconsistency of the zombies, inconsistency of the weapons, the inconsistency of how the zombies attacked, and the inconsistency of the demons. Like the demon, well, there was points where like the demon, we didn't really talk about it, but the imps, people would have, there was several times where 2 Marines would unload multiple clips into the imps and they would not go down. But then every once in a while, somebody could just jump on them, do like a Black Widow, legs around the head, slide around, and shoot them like 3 times with the pistol, and they would die.
Yeah.
It's make it hard or make it easy. I don't care. Pick one.
That's what she said.
Like, or make it depending on the weapon. Like in the Doom games, the big thing is that you get the pistol, and then you get the shotgun, then you get the rifle, and then you get the rocket launcher or whatever it is.
See, and
like,
to me,
make it where
that
it's like,
feels like what you just described, that ascension of weapons, should be a feature of whatever the movie is. And that it also makes
right.
more sense that it's one person instead of a squad of Space Marines.
Right. Like they just keep upgrading their gear. So
I think all of the Space Marines should die in the first act, and then the rest of the movie should
like
just
in
be
the first
one.
wave of the attacks, and then like you said, like Die Hard.
Yeah.
Then it's just her. I think that would, she or him, whatever version of the movie, I think that would be cool. I think that would totally be fine.
Yeah.
Or, and like we also didn't have like, you could even put him in a suit. Like Doom Guy has a suit of armor, and that can briefly explain, like that could be a reason why one person's able to do it a little bit better.
Yeah, maybe that's something they pick up, you know?
Yeah. So at this point, we got to say, was the remake worthwhile? Did it do anything? Was it justified being made?
No,
what do you think?
The first one
Final
was
thoughts?
better. The second one blew it on every front, I think.
I agree. And a lot of people, reviews, think this movie's amazing, so bad it's good. I just think it's bad. I don't think it crossed into the it's so bad it's good territory.
I didn't enjoy it at all.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the news now. Movie news. So the last thing, and I think we're just going to go through these pretty quick. I think we'll each just say like a 1 to 2 sentence thought on each one. Originally, we were going to record a couple other episodes, but it ended up not working out because of all these delays. But I think the first one we got to talk about is coronavirus canceling a bunch of movies. So Fast and the Furious 9 got pushed an entire year. Mulan just got pushed. They didn't say when it's coming back. The Quiet Place 2 got pushed with no known date of when it's actually coming back. 007 got pushed in November. So a lot of movies are getting canceled and pushed. And I think the funniest thing about that is, depending on when movies come back, if they push like Black Widow, which they haven't done yet, we may end up having Bad Boys 3 be the biggest movie of the year.
Yeah, man. And Invisible Man is going to get Best Picture.
Yeah, it might. It might. Like there's not a lot coming out, so that's a little unnerving. And
the DC
and
Marvel stuff is interesting to me, because if Black Widow gets delayed, then it's going to come out. It would end up coming out after the Falcon and Winter Soldier series, for instance, and like everything.
But that got delayed too, actually.
Did it?
Yeah, it got delayed because they were filming in Prague.
Interesting. All right. Well, anyway, I don't know the
Mission
details about
Impossible
that, but
too.
my point is, for DC and Marvel, everything is serialized, so everything would have to get delayed. You know, they have a specific order that they want to release things in, so that's even more of a ripple effect for them.
But that's probably the biggest news in in entertainment. Some of the other things that came out, the Candyman trailer came out. I haven't had a chance to watch that one yet.
It looks pretty good. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I definitely did watch that. Rick Moranis is coming out of retirement for the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids kind of a reboot. It's supposed to be Josh Gad is playing his son and is also a scientist and has a similar experience to the first movie.
Josh Gad just keeps on getting work, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's always getting work. We saw a lot of stuff on the Batman. We saw the Batsuit. We saw the Batmobile. We saw a stunt driver crash going like 5 miles an hour in the rain.
Now, are you excited for that?
The more I see, like, it's weird. Like my interest keeps. It's like a roller coaster. It goes up and then it goes down. It goes up, it goes down. I'm not a big fan of the suit, but I kind of dig the car.
My interest is like the coronavirus curve, man. It just keeps on going up.
Matt Reeves, I trust him and I just trust him. I like everything that he's
yeah.
done. So I'm going to see this movie regardless because of him. I'm not 100% on Robert Pattinson.
Oh, I think that's a great casting choice.
Well, the thing is funny. Warner Brothers is like, yeah, a lot of people call him like Robert Pattinson, Pattinson, like a bunch of different names he has online. Warner Brothers apparently is actually mad at him because they wanted him to bulk up, and it's like certain people can't bulk up. He can get cut, but like he has a body type that he's never going to be big.
You know what? What I see Matt Reeves doing with this movie, where it's more Tim Burton-y in the sense that he's going for a real like noir thing than any of the more recent movies. You know, Christian Bale was very realistic, and Ben Affleck was in the bigger world of, you know, Superman and stuff. And he's still kind of the straight man, but it's big muscles and, you know, big hulking cars and this bullshit. And this one feels like it's a little bit more like, you know, Batman 66 almost, or the Tim Burton Batman.
Yeah, and I like that.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
I think the thing,
it's a good time
I really like the Batmobile because the Batmobile
it's a muscle car.
Was a car. Yeah, it was a muscle car.
It's fucking awesome.
Up until Tim Burton took it, and then it went and evolved into all these different things, to the tank, to the stylized car. So I kind of like the resetting it back to like a car that just looks like they modded it like crazy.
I mean, I think that's all they could have done with the Batman franchise at this point.
Yeah, I like the idea that it's going noir. I'm not 100% on the casting. I haven't seen much from Robert Pattinson in a while. I wanted to see The Lighthouse, never got to it. But what I have seen him in, I haven't been impressed. But Warner Brothers definitely sees something because he's in the new Christopher Nolan movie, Tenet, and he's in Batman. So clearly Warner Brothers wants to work with him.
Right.
So I think that's all the things that I really wanted to talk about. I've got a couple quick ones. The Diego Luna dropped out of the Scarface remake, but that's kind of been on hold for quite a while. The Raid, they were making an American version of The Raid. They finally decided not to call it The Raid, and it's just going to be a different movie now. So I guess for all intents and purposes, the Raid remake is dead.
I'm kind of okay with that. People should go see the original Raid movies, both of them.
I agree. And then the last one that I kind of have is the director of Escape from New York wants to remake it and cast Wyatt Russell, Kurt Russell's son, as Snake Plissken, which that could be fine.
The director of, you mean John fucking Carpenter?
Really to talk about. Sorry, what was that?
The director of Escape from New York. Do you mean John fucking Carpenter?
No, the new one. They're remaking it.
Oh, the new director wants to recast it.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I don't know who it is now. Like the article I found just said the director. Originally, it was going to be the guy who did Kong versus Skull Island, and then it was going to be Robert Rodriguez, and now it's somebody else. I think Robert Rodriguez would have been great, but it's not him anymore.
Jordan Robert Voight, I believe.
Oh, it is. Okay, then it is the guy who did Skull remake. Skull.
No, I'm just saying that's
Kong Skull Island.
I'm just saying that's who did Kong Skull Island.
Oh, got it.
I feel like we should use his name because he's cool and Kong Skull Island's fucking fantastic.
I loved Kong Skull Island.
Yeah.
And that's the last one. There was another big thing I wanted to cover in the news, but it's actually going to be what our next episode's going to be about, which is also going to be our first topic episode. So we will get that to you guys shortly on social media. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for our first episode. This is Alex's first episode, so don't be surprised if it changes a little bit, the ebb and flow changes, but please stick with us as we kind of reinvent the show and come in, get it to come into itself, and Alex kind of comes into his own as a host. But, I'm really
that sounds like you didn't like my job today.
No, it's totally fine. It's just like I guarantee as you get more comfortable with hosting and everything, things will get a little bit different.
I've been told that I grow on people.
This is technically our second episode recording. Our first episode had a little bit of technical difficulties, which is totally fine. The first time around had it, and I'm just excited to take the punches, roll with them, and really evolve this show into something different. I definitely am looking forward to where the show's going to go, and I'm once again really excited to have Alex on, and I hope all you old listeners continue to listen and support Alex, and I'm looking forward to any new listeners that pop up that know Alex on social media and pop into Remake Rewind for the first time. So to new listeners and old listeners, thanks for listening. Please check us out on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at MDXpods. If you guys want to support the show in any way, you guys can check out patreon.com/MDXpods. But other than that, thanks for listening, guys. And then also, please, for new listeners, old listeners, anybody, please also check out Alex on social media. Alex, where can our listeners find you?
On Instagram, it's at Dyslexic, which is just dyslexic with Alex in the middle. And on Twitter, I'm at Pulisci, which is my last name. P as in Paul, Ulisci.
And I will put links to both our social media as well as Alex's on the description below. On YouTube, depending on your podcast app, it could be anywhere. But in the details of this episode, I will have links to his social media. But check him out; he posts a lot of great stuff, a lot of funny stuff. He also has some T-shirts and some merch that he sells that are pretty great and pretty funny. So check that out. But we will be back in a couple of weeks, and it will be our first themed episode. If you guys have been on our social media, you should have seen some of the prompts and questions we've asked, and that may give you an idea of what we'll be doing. But look forward to that. I'm really excited about our first topic episode. But once again, thanks for listening, and have a great day.
Take it easy.